I'm going to start with my introduction. So this presentation was brought to you by AIA Seattle's Emergency Professional Travel Scholarship. I was awarded the travel scholarship back in 2020, and then the pandemic hit, and therefore I was not able to do the travel, obviously. And then I revisited the project in the beginning of this year in January, where I started my travel and the research. And the whole topic of this presentation is about senior co-housing as an alternative to current senior housing options that we have in the States, but then also looking at European models as a role model to how we can do things differently in the States. So the presentation outline is how I'm going to structure the conversation. So firstly, it's an overall of the scholarship and an introduction to senior co-housing and summary of each of the communities I visited and how COVID impacted senior co-housing projects and communities, and looking at briefly senior LGBTQ co-housing solutions that exist currently and that some that are on their way. And then some of the major takeaways that I have from this project, and then just wanting to thank the participants and then providing you with some of the resources that I had found during my journey through this project. Okay, so how I became curious about senior co-housing. So on the right of the screen, you'll see it was just about 5 years ago, there was a really big pandemic of Japanese elderly women who were single because their husbands had passed away, and traditionally the elder woman would be at home when the husband would go to work, and so there weren't a lot of established communities or relationships that they would have. And so what's been happening in Japan is a lot of elderly women are incredibly lonely, and when their husbands pass, they don't have that network of friends to have conversations with. And so what they've been doing is committing small petty crimes so that they can go to prison. And in prison, they find refuge because they're no longer alone. And when I found out this was happening in Japan, I just was completely shocked and felt that there had to be some better solutions out there for an aging population. And of course, Japan is a little bit ahead of us. A lot of countries are going to be facing this issue. The Japanese community is just a lot more elderly than in other countries. And then on the left, I was working at a firm where I did a lot of senior co-housing projects, and you'll see these renderings here. And then at the bottom, you'll see some interior renderings. And when I look at these projects and the cost of living at these projects, I just feel like that's not something that we could tolerate with regards to how we treat our senior citizens. And I really firmly believe that the way a society treats their elderly is a reflection of their values. And if we have these fancy homes that cost $6,000-7,000 a month to live in, and that's just with a senior living that does not account for assisted living or memory care. And the design directive that I've been given when I was working on these projects is that you have to make them as Instagrammable as possible. And most senior citizens I know of don't use Instagram. So it's just sort of like this disconnect of what developers are building for seniors with regards to what seniors actually want and need. So this is a map of where I went on my project, and the methods I used was I researched each community. Each community I visited was the first senior co-housing project in their city, and that's relevant because they were the first, they had jumped over many of the hurdles to get something like co-housing developed and came into fruition. So then I went and did a site visit, and then I had conversations where I had interviewed community members about what they liked about the architecture, what they struggled with community. And this is what you'll be hearing for the next few slides. The first one was in London. It was called Ouch, the older women's co-housing community. They are now called New Ground Housing. It's in High Barnet, which is North London. And then in Paris, the Baba Yaga House, which is also in a suburb called Montreux. and then afterwards came back to the United States and visited Phoenix Commons in Oakland, California, and then PDX Commons in Portland, Oregon. And then lastly, went very locally to Quimper Village in Port Townsend. So, what is senior co-housing, anyways? It adheres to six essential principles. Future residents participate in the design. There are extensive common facilities. Projects are completely owner managed. They are also designed to facilitate community. There's no hierarchy in decision making, and there's no shared economy beyond what it takes to create the project. And just to note that this project does not reference anything but active seniors. It's not intended to explore the needs of seniors requiring assisted living or memory care. Okay, benefits of social housing. You'll receive social support in the sense that you'll get a sense of community and support from the older adults that you live with. Residents tend to share at least 2 meals a week, and they share activities and companionship at the facility. Reduce living costs. It can be a little bit more affordable because you're sharing things as opposed to living in your own single family home. You're sharing services like kitchen, laundry room, parking at common areas, and then you have access to other amenities that would additionally cost you other money. For example, gym, pool, going to the library, and it also provides a sense of safety and security in the sense that you always know where your neighbors are and where they know where you are, and so there's no concern about you not being seen, for weeks on end, and that provides a very solid sense of safety and security. Disadvantages of senior co-housing, however, can be a lot of meetings and a lot of decision making, which requires you to be very active in your community and stay active in the sense that you are considered like a board of a director where you are making decisions for the entire community. And at times, because people are people and you can't always agree with everybody, there will be issues where you have to sometimes have conflict resolutions, and this can sometimes lead to conflicts between residents, but in general, there's usually a policy that a senior co-housing community will adopt to address these issues. But overall, senior co-housing can provide a lot of benefits as opposed to living in your own home or in a different senior facility. And it's really just important to weigh the pros and cons for you personally to understand what would best fit your needs and your personality. Um, Also, just to say that loneliness is one of the biggest issues that a lot of seniors in our society tend to deal with. And, there's been a lot of recent studies out there that basically talk about how loneliness is really so bad for our health that it could be the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It, it can help advance heart disease, cancer, and mental illnesses, etc. And so, living in senior co-housing has definitely shown to be beneficial with regards to delaying things like dementia, delaying hospitalization and mental illness and things like that. Okay, so the first co-housing community that I visited was New Ground, and here are some of the stats. It has 25 units, 17 leaseholds, which in English is just mean it's a mortgage that you have, and then 8 is social renters. In England, social renters are subsidized by social communities that are responsible to provide social housing for low-income residents, and they vary between 1 to 2 and 3 bedrooms. Some of the issues with co-housing, though, however, can be how long it takes to develop. And so, for example, this community took about 18 years. It was completed in 2016, and the minimum age is 50, and they range from 58 to 86. The architect of this project, Patrick Delvin, was very essential with regards to how he worked with the community of women to participate in workshops to really help them drive the design. And some of the financing models you see here is that they had a mixture of housing associations, social housing grants, and trusts, and a very great partnership with Hanover Association. So here you'll see some of the elements of the design that the women really helped participate with. At the lower left corner, you'll see some of the workshops they held with the architect at the firm's office, where they discussed their values and what they wanted to see within the architecture. One of which, in this middle picture here, you'll see the the size of their very generous balconies that each unit has on the upper levels. And then this really interesting element, which really helped with during the COVID pandemic, was these windows that looked into the kitchen area, but all the way through the unit, so that people could connect, even though they didn't physically connect, but could have visual connection when people were isolating during the pandemic. The next is Baba Yaga House, and this was an interesting co-housing project in the sense that it took a very long time as well, 15 years, but it was started by a feminist, Therese Clark, who back in the 70s was a very prominent feminist, and what she basically did was went to the French government and convinced them to fund the project by literally doing the numbers. She basically said, this is how much it's going to cost the French government if each of these women lived separately on their own and later aged in their own place, where you would have to fund the the care of these women individually. However, if you built this co-housing project for us, we would take care of each other, thereby reducing the strain on the social welfare and healthcare state. Low right here, you'll see the rendering. So here are the um, drawings, the elevations and plan that you'll see, and the section on the bottom left. They were very private with regards to their units, and so I was not really able to share too much about the individual units, but I will say that they are a bit small. It's a pretty suburban but urban neighborhood. They're all studios, and if I go back to the stats, you'll see that 25 units in total on the property, 21 designed for the elderly, and then they actually have 4 ground level studios that are reserved for students. Um, as of late, the Baba Yaga 6-story still accommodates 21 women, 7 of them which are still the original members of the community. These studios down here are made for students that they have come and live, and the students are required to assist with the community with regards to anything that they need in terms of the women need help with technology or fixing something that is part of the inexpensive rent that the students receive. Here you'll see the colored elevations of the project as well. Okay, thirdly, I visited PDX Commons in Portland, Oregon. This one was unique in that the community had reached out to professionals to assist them with this idea of this senior co-housing community, and with that they hired Urban Development Partners, which is a developer, and they were the ones that secured the site and also had access to the architects, which was work process architecture. And so in a way, it really facilitated the fruition of this community, and thereby allowing this community to have a lot of input and say with regards to how this place is designed, what their values were, and how does that play out in the architecture. As of note, you'll see these nodes here, and these were very significant with regards to how the community was able to get together during the pandemic and allowed to visit without going into each individual's um, unit. And then here you'll see this is their main center, which is their kitchen and main dining space. This is what they call the living room. It's the first thing you see when you walk in, the street view. And then they also have a rooftop garden where they grow a lot of vegetables. I came in the winter, so that's why it doesn't look like that too much. But there's also a barbecue and a nice view from the rooftop. And on the right here, you'll see a list of their multitude of um, amenities. It is also an urban fabric, so one of the things that have been a concern is security, but they're doing things to address that. I will point out that they have this really awesome dog washing station next to their bike station. Okay, so the next one is the Phoenix Commons. Phoenix Commons was also driven by a developer, Christian Zimmerman of Elder Village Development. The interesting element about this developer is that he predominantly um, does projects that are surrounding elderly care and memory care and assisted living. And so he was very familiar and was curious about co-housing and developing a senior co-housing project, and was able to connect with a community that was willing to work with him and create this really beautiful modern project in Oakland, California. It's also adjacent to Alameda, California, which is a small community that's more on the affluent side. Um, and you could see part of the project connected one part of Oakland's outdoor amenity space with this really beautiful long trail that has become a public amenity. Here are images of the courtyards, which was also very beneficial during the pandemic, where they were able to gather outside and have a share lunch. Another thing they did during the pandemic was they came out and sang happy birthdays and things like, and had dance parties. And so it was the architecture that really facilitated the community in multiple ways. Here you'll see another view of that and more of the water. This is a typical unit that's on the top level. The top level had, I think 13 feet high ceilings, very quite high ceilings, and then a view of their dining space and their kitchen space, which had a mixture of domestic and industrial equipment to feed the community. And then they also had, as part of their amenity space, an exercise room with a sauna outside, and an area for if there was needs for a nursing room that was also provided in their main space. This is just a typical floor plan on the top floor. You'll see a rendering here and a rendering of the floor plan. Again, another list of the community spaces. Each of these community rooms that I visited in the States also had guest rooms, and that way your unit alone did not have to be so big. But if you wanted guests, you could rent out or borrow the um, shared rental guest rooms um, for your guest, which was very convenient. And I also stayed at Phoenix Commons guest room as a guest so that I could be and live amongst the community members for a couple of days, which was really beneficial. And last but not least, Quimper Village. So Quimper Village was something that initially wasn't a part of my original proposal, but after having gone to the other communities, had realized that every project I visited was urban. That I really wanted to have an example that was of more of suburban project. This one is called Quimper Village. It's in Port Townsend, Washington, and was also designed by Mike Durant Architects, who has written many books about senior co-housing and the co-housing movement. And his designs are sort of modeled after the Copenhagen Danish co-housing model. So it's not focused on a very modern but more cottage-like feel with regards to the architecture. On the bottom here, you see their main house, which is their main dining space, and the entry here, which is very different from the ones that I visited in the urban environments. Is the first thing that you see is you'll see a series of garages, as opposed to the architecture of the housing units itself. You have to kind of go into the site a little bit further before you are uh, faced with the living units. Some examples of the the common spaces. So the laundry, their dining space. This is the entry to their common house, their kitchen. Along the paths, which the paths sort of connect each of the housing units, there are these beautiful landscaping that each of the community members help with maintaining. And they also have these guest units as well as a workshop, and they also have an art room, which I do not have a photo of, but it's really quite nice. And I put the floor plans up here too because, again, these units, these cottages are quite different from the other communities that I had visited. They're much larger. being suburban, the smallest one being 910 square feet, and the largest being 1335. They're generous. They're high. They all have high ceilings. They're all very much designed with universal design in mind, uh, being that they all are single floor, no stairs, and flat levels to all of the program spaces. So some of the common threads, as I had mentioned some of these already, but just wanting to reiterate that because my project was postponed by the COVID pandemic, I really wanted to look at how co-housing facilitated or not facilitated the the sheltering in place, and what did it do to the amount of loneliness and that sense of community that they tend to have in general. So there has been some studies from the Journal of Aging and Environment, and they have founded that um, it that more people in senior co-housing environments felt that they had their still mutual support, and that they felt better there than where they lived previously. And almost every single person surveyed felt that living in a co-housing project would be much better than having lived in their own single family house that they previously lived in. Um, Here are some quotes from some of the people in the communities that I visited. COVID also illustrated to some community members that were not sure if co-housing were right for them, that it sort of facilitated or advanced their decisions to leave, because they didn't enjoy the the requirements of the community, where you know it was more about community first before individual rights. And so it was the people that felt like they did not want to be told what to do that ended up leaving the community, and new people coming in, um, which I understand to be was a good thing, and not necessarily a bad thing. And another one from a Phoenix Commons member, which said, "We weren't alone, we were just isolated." And so that notion of loneliness, as it persuaded in much of the society at the time, just didn't exist as much as it did for these senior co-housing community members. Touching on co-housing and LGBTQ seniors, as you can imagine, as we all grow, and many of us, don't get married, don't have children, don't have a support family. This is really prevalent amongst the LGBTQ community, especially the existing elderly community, because they had um, started off in the 70s and grown older now, and a lot of them did not at the time have the opportunity to get married and to start families. And so this is a predominant population that really needs this type of assistance and needs this type of community to help facilitate their aging, and the issues around their aging of loneliness and isolation in this older LGBT population. So when I was in the UK, and this is one of the benefits of being a recipient of the travel grant, is Patrick Duffin, the architect of New Ground, introduced me to Tonic, and also the elder lesbian co-housing community. So these different projects are all in their different stages, and they all have different models. And so older lesbian co-housing is just starting up. Well, they've been around for a few years, quite frankly, but they've been struggling with finding a financing model and a site that they can afford in an area of London that they would like to live in. And so that's in a process of them still seeking those two things. Village Hearth Co-housing in Durham, North Carolina, has been around for a while, and was also designed by Durant, the uh, the the same architect that had worked on Crimper Village. Tonic is a very unique model in the sense that it was a community that got together and wanted to live together and wanted to be community led. But what the difference between them and other co-housing projects, because it's not necessarily a co-housing project, even though they do establish their grounds as well, is that instead of doing all of the work themselves, which much of the senior co-housing projects do, they were given the assistance of a board and a CEO, and these uh, people on the board and the CEO went after the funding, went after the site, and they sort of got super lucky and found a project that was designed by Norman Foster in London, and was able to just move in. And they moved in because the project already had all the wish list items that they were looking for in a new project for them for that community. So they just got really lucky. And my hope is that people will look at these projects uh, and reach out, learn from what they've learned so far, and start their own LGBTQ senior co-housing projects. Okay, so my takeaways and overall observations is that the funding challenges impacts of the model that the community ex, uh, goes after and uses to build their site really has an impact on their impact of the design. Um, Again, the example I mentioned earlier is the Baba Yaga House, and having it be government funded, they've lost their community center. In Phoenix Commons, for example, though, the community did not have a lot of input with regards to how they wanted to utilize the architecture. One of the women that I spoke with, she loves using the stairs because that's how she gets her exercise every day. One of the things she just doesn't really appreciate is the stair from the parking level to the ground level. So this image over here on the left is the upper level stairs, and then the one on the bottom is the parking level stairs. And it's her least favorite thing to do, but she still does it because she wants that exercise. So something like this could have been easily uh, addressed during a design phase with the community, where you lay out your values and you lay out your wants and needs. And had that participation happen, maybe this situation might not necessarily be there. So how you fund your project and how it gets designed impacts your later happiness and satisfaction with living in your community. Another element and takeaway is hiring professionals. A lot of times people form a community thinking, oh, how hard could it really be? And one of the lessons that I've learned from these communities is that if you hire a knowledgeable team early on, it makes a huge difference with regards to how fast you are able to develop your project and community, and the efficiency of the process, and how well the process becomes a seamless one. There's a lot of people, a lot of developers that are out there that have experience, and so it's just finding the right team to help facilitate what your community's values are. Um, Affordability. When I initially started this project, I really thought that this would be a lot more inexpensive than the current offerings for senior housing. And not, it isn't say to say that it isn't, but you do have to have equity up front to be a part of and to join many of these communities. And hopefully sometimes something like that will maybe change in the future. Um, Building community. So building the building is the easy part, right? So building the community is the hard part, which also comes from a PDX comment member direct quote. And that being said, there's a lot of focus on getting the project done, finding the site, getting the architect, building the units, and then moving in. And a lot of people think that sometimes that's the end of it. But what the communities have been finding out is um, the bigger charge is really to work to learn how to build a community to where it becomes a well-oiled machine and you function really well, and as a contained community, and you support each other and grow together, and evolve as the community evolves. um, Another item that every community was facing that I find really interesting, and because they did sort of come around the same time frame, was that aging in community has become a challenge and a task. Each community had focused on creating a focus group that would look at these issues. And so many times communities will bring in people to do workshops, speakers. They'll have conversations around the topic of death and dying, or growing old, or looking at the first signs of Alzheimer's and what does that look like, and which should the next step be. And so it's an ongoing conversation. There's not one community that really knows the right solution. And I think that that's something that each community has to figure out for themselves and their own values and their own members and what does that actually look like. Um, I will say though that the LGBTQ community tonic has in the same building a 24-hour emergency health services that was a part of the agreement to move into that structure. So there are a lot of options. I think what it's going to take is just looking at what people are doing and how that might fit your co-housing community. Um, second to last is participation. A lot of people look at that word and say, I know what that means for me, but what does that mean for you? And in so that sense, it's what makes a successful senior co-housing community is the level of participation that each community member brings and provides. And that community only is successful when people participate. Um, and lastly, meetings, meetings, meetings. If you don't like meetings, you don't want to live in a co-housing community because co-housing communities is all about getting together, coming to consensus, having agreement, and moving forward as a community, knowing that you all have come to the agreement of how to move forward as a community. So I just wanted to thank everybody, specifically AIA Seattle, New Ground, Baba Yaga House, Phoenix Commons, PDX Commons, Cremper Village, Tonic, especially CEO Anna Care, and the London Older Lesbian Co-Housing Community. I had such an amazing experience interviewing the community members, talking to them on a personal level and as a group, and learning from their experiences. And it was something that will um, always be with me as I look forward to my years of aging gracefully. And just really wanted to say that all of the time that you provided me in the conversations was incredibly invaluable. And on the resources, two books that I wanted just to mention here that were inspirations and really inspired the project, but also really framed the way that I had conversations with people at the community. The one on the left being from the Surgeon General. He was Obama's Surgeon General, and he is a doctor that has really uh, researched and documented the impacts of loneliness in our society. And the entire book together really talks about how loneliness impacts our health physically and mentally, and how in the health industry, it's not really talked about as much as it should be because it does impact our everyday lives, and how learn to be within a strong uh, close knit community can really um, delay those health effects and also promote a better way of aging gracefully. And then on the right is a book that started my research in senior co-housing because he talks about it a lot in the book. And it's really a book that I think that everybody should read. It's really a conversation starter about how do we begin to talk about how the way we want to die, and how do we have those conversations with people that are in our lives that are really important, and how do we make sure that we honor and ensure that they die the way that they want to die. And usually people want to die in their own homes with their family surrounding them, but 70% of the American population does not does not occur in that way. It's usually done in a hospital because hospitals whole goals are to try to keep us alive as long as possible, but sometimes that's just really not what we really want. Um, and then some web sources that are easily Googleable with regards to Senior Co-Housing Foundation for Intentional Communities. Housing Learning and Improvement Network is or an organization that I was also introduced to by Patrick. And it's an organization that's a nonprofit that really helps connect people and organizations to current resources and research with regards to how do we solve our biggest problem of housing of our housing crisis and the lack of housing and the lack of affordable housing in the UK specifically for this organization, but also a lot of their solutions and research could be applied to the US. Um, And Collaborative Housing and Innovative Care Project is a project that is also a research project out of the University of Bristol. And then SAGE USA, which is a nonprofit organization that advocates, looks for services for the LGBTQ elders. And with that, I would like to share a video that was recorded by the researchers at the Collaborative Housing and Innovative Care Project regarding a lot of the research they did for senior co-housing and its impact on loneliness and isolation.
With a social care system in crisis, we urgently need to consider every innovation in housing, ageing and care that might help support us as we get older. Our study, Collaborative Housing and Innovative Practice in Social Care, explores the ways in which collaborative housing can help meet the changing care needs of older people. By collaborative housing, we mean a wide range of user-led, self-organised and community-orientated forms of housing. And when we talk about care, we mean not just formal social care, but also the wider practical, personal and emotional support provided formally or informally. Our research looked at 6 housing communities which included co-housing, intentional communities with individual homes but also shared spaces and a commitment to community life. Some for older people only, others multi-generational. Senior housing co-ops, housing for social rent with on-site wardens. Self-managed retirement housing, also with a manager or warden on site. In total, we've interviewed more than 100 residents across the 6 communities to explore the benefits and challenges of growing older in collaborative housing. The most prominent finding from the research was that there are real benefits of living in collaborative housing in later life, and one key part of this is greater social interaction through housing design, organised activity, or the need to manage the scheme together.
I think the difference with living in the co-op is the community involvement. People help each other out.
If there's a problem, if there's an emergency, I know I can call on anybody, and that is a wonderful feeling to live with, that you know that there is a support there.
It proved itself when we had COVID and the lockdown, because we certainly embraced that as a community and managed to see each other and be apart, you know, and masks and all that sort of thing. But nevertheless, we had company.
We have bingo on a Monday, Tuesday we have bacon putty, Wednesday bingo, and then Thursday just a nice cup of tea. But you can go on a Friday if you want to, like it's always open for you. I made up, I love them all, they're great.
All the members have a vote to elect people onto a committee, and that committee is made up of 14 to 16 people at any one particular time who make decisions on behalf of all the residents on how and what needs to be done to keep the cooperative going. We appoint the contractors, we appoint the managing services and anything that needs to be done.
It's the high degree of mutual support that makes collaborative housing strikingly different from living alone, with family, or in retirement housing. In different ways, each of the schemes makes it possible to age at home for longer, often delaying the need for a move into formal care settings. Living in collaborative housing also brings a strong sense of security and emotional support. It can be as simple as keeping an eye on whether your neighbour has put their blinds up in the morning, or having each other's allergy details or emergency contact details to hand.
Somebody's always there if there's an emergency. If you even just say, can anybody lend me a lemon? Similarly, I'm there if anybody has an emergency. Little things like, today I've made too much soup, and so I've taken a bit of soup to someone who I know is not very well and would appreciate a bit more soup, you know.
I've got a neighbour at the moment who's off work next door to me who's had a hand operation, and I've been knocking on her when I've been going to the shops asking if she needs anything.
Well, I have been asked to rescue somebody breaking down the bathroom door where they're stuck in the bathroom. So I help wherever I can help.
You offer to help with the things you're good at, so I help out a bit with the maintenance tasks and a bit with the digital stuff, setting up Zoom calls and things like that. But I don't think of it as a role, it's just I can do some stuff, so I'm happy to help people, and likewise other people are happy to help us, look after the girls or bring our washing down or put our bins out for us if we're in a rush in the morning, so we all just help each other out really.
While creating a close and supportive community was a key aim, it's not intended in any of the schemes that members would become carers for each other. So it's important that limits are recognised, even if not written down as clear rules.
I think it's that point at which someone is beginning to not cope at home, which is the hardest thing. We in no way are set up to rescue each other. We won't do personal care, we won't put in your hearing aids, we won't change your bed sheets, but we will look after your cat if you go on holiday, we will do shopping if you're ill. And if it's time for somebody to go and be looked after more intensively, then I'm afraid that has to happen.
Where the boundary is where it becomes personal care that's needed. Helping them into bed, helping them out of bed, dressing them, toileting them. That's going to need professional care. We'll do their shopping, maybe help clean sometimes if they require that and they're not able to. Anything we can give in the way of ordinary neighbourly help.
On the other hand, each of the non-co-housing communities also have various levels of formal support built into their models, from on-site managers to communal services, with the costs shared by all residents. The managers, essentially employed by the residents themselves, are central figures in these schemes.
If anybody is in any difficulty, the first thing they think of is to phone for the manager. For anything really, not just on an emergency.
We're fortunate we have a manager who, although his brief is to be 9 to 5, but if there's an emergency or anything like that, and he lives on site, so that if there's any real emergency, he's usually there helping and assisting.
She phones you every morning between 9 and 9:30 just to make sure you're okay. If you don't answer, I've done it one time and you didn't hear it, and she'll come round, knock on the door to keep a check on you.
All the gardens are looked after. The same with the winter cleaners. They have their own winter cleaning service. So it's part of the tenancy, which is a good thing because they're not missing out on nothing then. All the gardens are lovely.
Alongside mutual support and paid services, families often still do play a key role. They tend to be the ones who help older residents make important decisions in relation to care, such as organising paid assistance and decisions on moving out of the community.
As far as family is concerned, I recently had a very serious fall in the corridor here and really wasn't able to look after myself, so my daughter moved in and she is still here, making sure that everything is fine.
Of course, the communities face many challenges, from the difficulty of attracting younger members to building informal arrangements for care where these weren't included from the start.
The challenge is mostly to do with passing of time. We're all a lot older now than when we first moved in. We were an intergenerational community to begin with. We have been very lucky in that we got a new young family who did join us last year, and we've also got several younger lodgers and tenants who've recently moved in, which has helped to bring the average age down satisfyingly.
There have been ideas about building a room where there could be somebody, a carer who would then go to different people. The idea of having someone in the house is a good one, and, for less rent or no rent, that would be a good idea. None of us like to think we're going to be in that position, of course.
The various schemes that we've looked at here are maybe not for everyone. Co-housing in particular requires a high degree of social commitment, and none are intended as a substitute for properly funded and resourced social care. But we believe that the different models of collaborative housing that we've looked at allow people to remain socially connected, supported and in control of their lives for longer, especially in contrast with the options of staying put or moving into formal care that are often presented as the only choices.
If you've got total independence, total stability and you've got people around, it's really not a bad arrangement for a retired person. I would recommend it.